Kafka, jing, and Acheron. All of these units are limited 5-star lightning carries. All of them have the same goal in mind, which is to deal enough damage to kill your enemies. Some might say that one directly power creeps the other, but I think otherwise. My name is Kyte, and we'll be discussing power creep and how it's handled in Honkai Star Rail. Power creep is a concept in games where new content makes older content irrelevant or sometimes straight up useless. You see, power creep exists only in games where content is constantly being pumped out. Card games, gacha games, and MMORPGs. Let's say you already have a solid account filled with 5 stars, and they're already doing well in the meta. Why would you ever want to pull for new characters if your current characters are already performing? There are several reasons to make people want to keep playing your game and keep audience retention. It just so happens that power creep is very effective at that, but Hoyo does something different with their limited characters. It manages to keep their new content fresh without stepping on other characters' toes. It's showcased in every path and every character. Sustainer versus Sustainer. All the 5-star abundances and preservations can solo sustain comfortably. The difference between them is that all of them have some form of extra utility in their kit. Lotcha can sustain his team without ever needing to use a single skill point, and he also has his AoE Dispel. Fuxuan is nigh immortal, and Huohuo has insane cleanses. Fuxuan buffs her whole team's crit, while Huohuo buffs her team's attack and energy. The difference between them is that Fu and Huohuo consume a bit more SP compared to Lotcha. At their core, they're all sustainers, but their extra utility is more than enough to distinguish them from one another, and this allows diversity with building comps. Huohuo's better used with units who are reliant on attack and energy, such as Kafka's comps, while Fuxuan can be used with any DPS that wants to crit, and Lotcha's used in SP-hungry teams. Different archetype. I'll move back to Kafka, jing, and Acheron. All these units are lightning carries, but their numbers are relatively close to one another. So, why would you pull any of them over the other? Because they apply their damage differently. Jing Yuan's commonly played as a hyper carry, so you slap 2 harmonies on his team and watch Lightning Lord's gigantic backloaded motion values decimate his enemies. Kafka, on the other hand, amplifies her daughter teammates, and Acheron is like an inverse hyper carry. You slap 2 debuffers on her comp and she's golden. They all want different units, and Jing Yuan can deal with constant waves of enemies as a hyper carry, while both Kafka and Acheron need their supports to apply their dots and debuffs before the main carry can nuke. And on some content, others might be more effective. For example, that T-Rex and Death's pods are easily defeated with dots. All of these units can clear the hardest content in the game with 24 liquid substats. So when it comes down to it, the amount of difference each unit has in terms of mechanics, design, and animations is what drives people to pull for one over the other. They put care and effort into designing these characters without making them feel samey, so much so that they don't need to rely on cheap power creep tricks to keep you engaged. However, I rely on calls to action to urge you to hit that like and subscribe button. And even if there is a marginal DPAV number increase, F2P players and dolphins can always turn to Eidolons. Let's say you pulled Kafka, and you're worried that Acheron is going to be way stronger. You can easily just pull for Kafka's Eidolons, and that'll give her an increase in power. When you're pulling for an Eidolon, you don't have to do all the pre-farming and gearing pains that comes with a new character, but rather, it's just a straight up numbers buff in exchange for pulls. Now, the power of Eidolons can vary. An example that comes to mind is Sealess Eidolons kind of don't exist, but the concept of pulling for Eidolons instead of getting new characters is always going to be present, and all of this is part of Dawei's philosophy. If you weren't aware, he's the CEO or president or whatever of Hoyo. Even since 2011, he's had this idea of otaku, or should I say weeaboo losers, are willing to dedicate a lot of their time or money to show love to their PNG waifus. Now, I may be misinterpreting his words, but I get the vibe that he's a waifu over meta kind of guy. You can watch the video for yourself if you want. But even if the vision is solid, there are still some problems rooted in the game. The entire power creep section of the video only applies to limited 5-star characters. Not everyone is exempt from such a fate. All of the hyper carry 4-star characters, with a few exceptions, are pretty much outclassed by their 5-star limited counterparts. Even if you have their 6th Eidolon, most of the carries from 1.0 Rail just can't compete. I thought that an E6 4-star should at least be somewhere close to an E0 5-star, but that's not always the case here. An example in Genshin is the national team, where it's comprised of E6 4-star units but are still able to clear the hardest content. In Star Rail, the only ones that pop up in my mind is Tingyan, Pela, and Qingque individually, and even 5 stars aren't exempted from this, has directly power crept Yanqing. For every situation you could put Yanqing in, Jingliu can do it better. First up is that they are the same element of ice. Secondly is that their most impactful role is the exact same, which is Hyper Carry, a unit that you stack buffs on to deal damage to your enemies. And lastly, Jingliu deals more damage than Yanqing in both single target and AoE content. Because of this fact, people constantly discard Yanqing in the meta, and they'd be right for doing so. Jingliu has higher numbers and is better and is unconditional, which lowers diversity and truly fulfills the saying that Yanqing is useless. I personally don't like this fact, but the truth of the matter is that 4 stars don't really sell and aren't the main focus of the game. The national team I mentioned is just a single team after all, and that the rest of the 4-star cast share a similar fate to Star Rails. The shiny limiteds are what draws people's attention and spend money on. Another thing I'm slightly worried about is that there's going to be 3 limited harmonies that are released, including Robin, and all of them are great. They buff their whole team and have a lot of utility. However, for nihilities, they're still in a weird direction. Kafka and Acheron seem to be conditional DPSs, and I'm not seeing any debuffer nihilities in sight. I recognize that it might be too early to yap about this though, so I'll hold my tongue and wait for more 4-star nihilities to make my conclusion. Hoyo has done a great job at mitigating power creep through new archetypes and variation. They don't take the easy way out of generating audience hype by giga boosting numbers. I'm grateful that the game is still somewhat balanced and fun. I'm not capping when I say that Star Rail is the best gacha I've played so far. If you've got any questions, ideas, or suggestions, please leave it down in the comments, and I'll be sure to respond to them. That's it for me, my name is Kyte, and I'll see you all in the next video. See ya, peace.